The morning sun was soft, still climbing through the mist that lingered over the backyard. Dew clung to the petals of the marigolds, and the earthy scent of wet soil filled the air. I was kneeling in the garden, gloved hands buried in the dirt, feeling the cool earth crumble between my fingers. Gardening had become my quiet escape, a place where I could forget how quiet the house had become lately. Each plant I tended felt like a tiny piece of control in a world that had grown uncertain. I could hear the faint chirping of birds and the distant hum of traffic, but inside me, there was only stillness. I planted seeds, watered the roots, and whispered to the flowers as though they could understand the loneliness that had settled in my heart. The roses had started to bloom again after a long season of neglect. Their deep red petals reminded me of how things used to be, when laughter filled the yard and soft conversations stretched long into the night. Now, there was only the sound of the wind, brushing through the leaves like a memory refusing to fade. I pushed my hair back from my face, smudging dirt across my cheek, and leaned over the small patch of lavender I had been nurturing. It had taken months for them to grow this strong, and in a strange way, I saw a reflection of myself in them, fragile once, but slowly learning how to stand tall again. As I worked, my thoughts drifted toward him. My husband had been distant lately. We didn't fight, but we didn't talk much either. The silence between us had become its own language, cold, polite, and unspoken. I tried not to think about it while I gardened, but every petal, every weed, every patch of soil seemed to remind me of the space between us. I wondered if he even noticed how hard I was trying to bring life back into this garden, into this home. The thought made my chest tighten, and I took a deep breath, letting the scent of basil and mint ground me again. Then I heard it, a soft crunch of gravel behind me. My heart skipped for a moment, thinking it might be one of the neighborhood kids, but the sound was steady, deliberate. I froze, my hands still in the dirt. The air shifted slightly, and I felt a familiar presence standing just a few feet away. I didn't need to turn around to know it was him. His cologne, subtle and warm, mingled with the earthy scent of the garden. For a second, I wanted to stay still, to pretend I didn't notice him, afraid of what silence might say this time. But then, his shadow fell across me, long and gentle, stretching over the marigolds, and something inside me stirred, a quiet ache mixed with something I couldn't name. He didn't say a word at first. I could hear him breathing behind me, slow and hesitant, like he was afraid to disturb the fragile calm of the morning. The crunch of his shoes on the pebbled path stopped just inches away, and I could sense the weight of his gaze on me. For months, I had longed for him to look at me, not just glance, but really see me. Now that he finally was, I didn't know what to do. My fingers trembled slightly as I brushed the dirt from the small trowel, pretending to be absorbed in my work, but every movement felt heavier under the awareness of his silence. Then, his voice broke through the quiet, soft but uncertain, like a memory I'd forgotten how to hear. "You've been out here a lot lately," he said. The words were simple, almost meaningless on their own, yet something in the way he said them, gentle, almost regretful, made my throat tighten. I nodded, still facing the garden. "It helps me think," I murmured. My voice came out rougher than I expected. The truth was, the garden was the only place that didn't make me feel invisible. I could plant something, nurture it, and watch it grow. It gave me proof that my efforts mattered. He moved closer, and I could feel the faint warmth of his body against the cool air. It was strange, how someone could feel so close yet so far away at the same time. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, carrying all the unspoken words we had buried over time, apologies, confessions, and fears we never dared to say aloud. Then, he bent down beside me. I could see his hands, rough from work, reaching toward a small sprout struggling to break through the soil. "You missed a weed here," he said quietly, pulling it out with surprising tenderness. I glanced at him then, really looked at him for the first time in what felt like months. The sun had touched his face with soft light, catching the tired lines around his eyes. But beneath the weariness, I saw something I hadn't noticed before, hesitation mixed with care. It was like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. I realized then that he wasn't just standing behind me, he was trying to meet me where I was, in the only place I still allowed myself to feel. He started helping without asking, handing me the small pots, straightening the plants I'd been too distracted to fix. His hands brushed against mine once, accidentally, but neither of us pulled away. The touch was fleeting yet heavy, carrying the weight of everything we hadn't said. I felt a lump rise in my throat as I watched him. For so long, I had built a wall made of quiet anger and disappointment, thinking he would never care enough to climb over it. But now, as he knelt beside me in the dirt, it wasn't words that reached me, it was the simple act of being there. We worked side by side for a while without speaking, our movements quiet and rhythmic, as if the earth itself was teaching us how to exist together again. The sound of the shovel scraping softly against the ground, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, it all blended into something peaceful. For the first time in months, the silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt alive, like it was carrying something unspoken yet understood. When I looked up, the sun had climbed higher, pouring golden light over the garden, turning every drop of dew into a tiny prism. He was still kneeling next to me, brushing soil from his palms, his eyes following the small row of flowers we had just planted. There was something vulnerable about the way he sat there, his shoulders slightly slumped, his expression softer than I remembered. He finally broke the silence, his voice low and unsure. "I didn't realize how much this place meant to you," he said. I swallowed hard, tracing the edge of a flower bed with my gloved finger. "It's the only thing I can fix," I whispered before I could stop myself. He looked at me, and I could see the flicker of pain cross his face, not because of the words, but because he understood them. For so long, we had both been pretending that things were fine, filling the house with distractions, avoiding the ache that lingered between us. But now, surrounded by the scent of lavender and fresh soil, the truth felt too heavy to hide. He reached out then, hesitating for a second before gently placing his hand over mine. His touch was warm, steady, familiar in a way that made something inside me crack open. "Maybe we can fix more than this," he said softly. It wasn't a promise, it was a question, fragile and uncertain, but it was more than I'd heard from him in a long time. My eyes stung, and I blinked rapidly, pretending it was just the sunlight. I looked at our hands, dirt-streaked and trembling slightly, and for the first time in months, I didn't pull away. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic confession, just two people sitting in the dirt, trying to remember how to care again. He helped me to my feet, and for a brief moment, I felt the weight of his hand linger at the small of my back. It wasn't just a touch, it was an apology, a reassurance, a quiet plea to start over. I turned toward him, and the way he looked at me then, really looked, made my chest tighten. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of blooming roses between us, and in that fleeting silence, I felt something shift. The distance that had once felt endless suddenly didn't seem so impossible. The garden around us, once a place of solitude, had become something else entirely, a reminder that even after the coldest seasons, things can still grow again if you're willing to tend to them together.